starting a second topic today. Talking about today about the borders of Eretz Yisroel in Shemittah. Okay, so Shemittah applies to all of Eretz Yisroel. The Eretz Yisroel is divided into two parts, so to speak, for our purposes. And that is when the Yidden came out of Mitzrayim and they captured parts of Eretz Yisroel. That's called the Olei Mitzrayim, the place that the people come from Mitzrayim captured. And that includes Hor Hahor also, the other side of the eastern side of the Jordan. And those things are chai, all those places are chai in Shemittah. The mitzvah of Shemittah applies to all those things. Yidden came back after the Galus of Bavel, and they came back to Eretz Yisroel. They captured a smaller amount of Eretz Yisroel. Basically, they didn't capture any of Hor Hahor, and they captured a smaller portion of Eretz Yisroel itself. That's called the Olei Bavel, the place of Olei Bavel. Okay, that's a smaller portion. What's it in? Almost all the... Not yet. No, we'll have pictures. Not of this. Not Olei Mitzrayim, Olei Bavel. Okay, so the din is, all the mitzvahs of Shemitah apply to the places of Olei Mitzrayim. That means the bigger area. Including Kedusha Shvius and Beer, all the mitzvahs apply, with one major exception, and the major exception is the mitzvah of the Isser of Tzvichim. The Isser of Tzvichim, the Isser D'Rabbanan, things that grow by themselves, that have to be replanted every year, like tomatoes and cucumbers, that you have to plant every year. Those things are usher even if they grew by themselves, because the Chum were afraid people would plant them and say they grew by themselves. So that Isser D'Rabbanan, the Chacham didn't impose that Isser D'Rabbanan on the places that are only the lands of the Olei Mitzrayim, since Shemitah there is only D'Rabbanan itself. It's only a D'Rabbanan in the places of the Olei Mitzrayim. So they said, you know what? We're not going to make the Isser Tzvichim in those places also. Okay? So those places don't have... So that's the major enough community between them. But otherwise... all the mitzvahs apply in all the places of Olei Mitzrayim. There's one other exception which is not so practical. It's going to come up again today, so I'm going to mention it. But there's one other exception, which is there are certain spots in the parts of Eretz Yisroel that are the Olei Mitzrayim, and in the broader parts of Eretz Yisroel, that Chazal specifically said there's no mitzvah of Shemitah at all in those places. Okay? The most famous one is Beishan. There's no mitzvah of Shemitah at all. Why? The Chachamim wanted that those places people should be doing work. There should be Meiser Ani, so that the poor people would have what to eat during Shemitah. So they bedafka wanted to be no mitzvahs of Shemitahs in those places. So there are certain places that are completely excluded from the mitzvah of Shemitah. Okay, but otherwise, most of the places of Olei Mitzrayim are chayiv in all mitzvahs of Shemitah except the Tzvichim. Okay, now the Gemara and the Mishnayos give us all kinds of ways of identifying all these places. Okay, it's full of places. So we're gonna, as we're going to see today, by and large, we don't make too much halakha l'maaseh out of those identifications. We're going to see that more as we go on. The one thing that's very clear is that the Hor Hahor we consider to be the places that was not captured by the Olei Bavel. Okay, so we, as a rule, will say that there's no mitzvah Isser Tzvichim on the things that are Hor Hahor, and the Yarden is pretty clear what it is. It's a big river going down there, and it's pretty easy to figure out what that is. So things that Hor Hahor, Hagam, Chaim Kanievsky brings raya, is that there are places in Hor Hahor that the Olei Bavel did capture. They did capture them, but as a rule, we just say is everything in Hor Hahor has no mitzvah, no Isser of Tzvichim. Okay. One last thing that I'll throw in, which is sort of from the opposite side, which is, I'll remind you that there's one mitzvah of Shemitah that applies even in Chutz La'aretz, and that's Shemitah's Ksavim. Okay. That's not really for today. Okay. So, now we have Gemaras and Psukim. Sefer Bamidbar has a couple of Psukim explaining to us what the borders of Eretz Yisroel are. Sefer Yeshua has many Prakim explaining to us what the borders of Eretz Yisroel are. And the Mishnayos and the Gemaras have all full of identifications of where Eretz Yisroel is and where the Olei Mitzrayim is and where the Olei Bavel is. But the Maisa is, for hundreds of years, no Jews living in Eretz Yisroel. A smattering here and there, but nobody was living there. So most of this information, which was very for real, it was like saying, like you were talking before, going to Western and to Kedzie, everybody knew what that was, but over the time, all that information was lost. Okay, we had no Messiah on what any of these places were. Because for hundreds of years, no Yidden living there, and all that information, the Gemara gave us so much. Let's look at Sefer Yeshua. All the places they went, from this place and to this place and this place, and to all of them that meant something. That was all like it was like saying we went to St. Louis. We don't know what that means, but to us, at this point, most of it was lost, and most of those questions of what Eretz Yisroel is or is not was very, if I could use the word, academic. Okay, it was just like an understanding of part of Torah, but it had no practical advice until the first sefer that the most famous. This is no place to read. Oh, sorry. Okay, the most famous of the early svarim that spoke about this was a sefer called Kafta V'Ferach from someone named Ishtari Haparchi. Okay, I don't know if that's a real name or not, but that's his name, Ishtari Haparchi, who wrote this sefer Mamish in the 1300s. He's a Talmud of the Rosh. So it was written for a very long time ago. They say that he spent 7 years learning these halachos, crisscrossing Eretz Yisroel. The Sefer is not only about geography. That's the most famous part of the Sefer. Really, the Sefer is all about Hilchos Eretz Yisroel. It's on and on. I mean, I forgot how many proclamations. It's a very, very long Sefer. What is it? That's only the second chelik. There's a third chelik also. It's very long. It's a very... what do you say? Well, it's halachas of Eretz Yisroel. It's halachas of Eretz Yisroel.
How many copies is it available to?
Yeah, this is a modern version of it. This is a modern version of it. You could also get it as the old version. I'm going to mention the old version later. Anyhow, that's the most famous sefer, still used today. Okay, the most famous sefer. After that came two other svarim, one called Tvus Aretz from some Rabbi Yosef Schwartz in the 1800s, and Adamus Kodesh from some Yitzhak Goldhar in the 1900s. Okay, so those three svarim are the more the older svarim that were written about this. Okay, and since then plenty more, because as you understand, as more and more Yidden started living in Eretz Yisrael, and Yidden there were more farmers that were Yidden, and there were all these kind of questions that became much more serious. All of a sudden, this was not just a Hilchos Mashiach, this was very for real. People need to know, as we're going to see, which place is Eretz Yisrael and which one is not. Where's Shemittah, where there's no Shemittah. So these things became much more Lamaisa. Okay, it's not Shayach.
It's negated for other things also, right? That's okay for Shemittah.
Yes, it's negated to other things also. We're focusing on the Shemittah part of it.
The same thing we go with Yom Tov Bavel is the same thing.
Yom Tov is a little bit different. Yom Tov is a little bit, but Trumas Meises is the same. Yeah, Trumas Meises is like this. Okay, so now we're not possibly going to go through all the shilos. Not that I know them, and not if we have time to do it. I mean, it's not much like this. I mean, in every little spot over here, there's what to talk about. Everyone has what to say about it. But what I'm going to do is like this. I'm going to talk to you about one general issue, about figuring out where the borders are, and then two specific issues just to give us a little flavor for what's going on here. Okay. So, okay. So these farm are this is the more visual part of what they have. They have lots of maps in there, but the sefer is not maps. You shouldn't think that the sefer is full of maps. Really, this farm are pages and pages and pages of details of all these kind of what kind of places are. Okay. So if we look in Chazal, and we look at Torah, we're going to find that there are places that the Torah and Chazal give us descriptions of certain places. Okay, they give us descriptions that let us understand what our place is like. Okay, they give us landmarks that help us figure this out. But by and large, there's some of that. But by and large, the way we know where places are is because it gives us a name. Okay, most things give us a name. So those names were gone. We have no idea where those places are, and nobody knows where Atzmoina is. Okay, so what happened was, starting from the Kafta Ferach, was he made up for the fact that they were missing the names by turning to the people who were living there and seeing what they call places. Okay, so and his sefer. So now like this. Well, before I tell you what he said, if you see in the Gemara that there's a place called Surya, okay, Samach Vav Reishut Alf, okay, and it has special dinim. It's right next to Eretz Yisroel. It has special dinim for Shemitah and Trumas Hamaisis, and a special dinim. It's not Eretz Yisroel, but it's close to Eretz Yisroel. And we know there's a country called Syria, right north of Eretz Yisrael. So all of us assume that the country that the Gemara talks about called Syria, and the place that we have that's called Syria are roughly the same, because Syria and Syria, I mean, come on, it's not a coincidence that they're both right next to Eretz Yisrael, and they have the same name. So Kafta Ferach did the same thing. And he brings, I'll give you some of the examples that I saw in the Sefer, Mishnah Yosef, you can hear from him later. He's a modern, contemporary person, he says, for example, he says, there's a city called Cheshbon. It was in the parsha a few weeks ago, Cheshbon, and he says, well, in Arabic, there's a city in the right space, which is called Choshban, okay, which he says, that's Cheshbon, okay, that's the same place called Cheshbon. Or Elio is supposed to have is born, Elio is called Elio Tishbi, he comes from a place called Tashuv, okay, and in the Arabic place, it's called Ashtib, okay, which is, what he says is Toshav. And then in a different variety, a different way of saying it, I don't say you're going to beat it all. I'm trying to show you the musag of what he does. Another place called Yavish Gilad. Okay, another place called Yavish Gilad. So he says in Arabic, there's a place called gofan, and gofan means dry. Okay, which is when they take Yavesh Gilad. Yavesh says it's the dry place in Gilad. He says that's what it is. So now, you can, he's a little older than you. So the idea is, I'm not trying to tell you that you should. Everyone agrees to everything that I just said just now. But the idea is that when we have a place and we're looking for a place called Cheshbon, okay, and we have certain ideas of what it's supposed to be, so he said, well, part of our figuring it out will be looking at what the people call it, the people who are still living there. Okay, so now, that's it. What did you say?
I think the Gemara even did places in the Gemara.
Yes, there's such a thing in the Gemara also. Yes, that's correct. Yes, the Gemara says that they thought that, what's the city called? I forgot what it's called. Yes, the Gemara says that. The Gemara says they made mistakes about it also. Okay, well, it's not such a, okay, so now. Came along the Chazon Ish. And the Chazon Ish said like this. He says, I don't know what to tell you. He says, how can you tell me that we're going to rely on the fact that it has an Arab name? He says, names change. Cities get destroyed. Things get moved around. You know what I mean? When there's a... Is there anyone? Nish. You're right, it's a mistake. Title. Okay. So there's sometimes, if there's an earthquake and the whole city gets destroyed and there's a fire, they move it over 10 miles over. Or they make a new name or something like that. So God says, I'm not a big believer in taking things out of an Arabic name. How much can I read into the fact that something has an Arabic name? And that means is, but listen, so what most people take from what the Chazon Ish says is that, therefore, you almost can identify nothing in Eretz Yisroel. Okay, there's almost nothing in Eretz Yisroel that we have enough descriptions of it to know what it is.
Not even Bnei Brak.
No, Bnei Brak is for sure. Of course not. But it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. If there's a concept, it's okay, so maybe Yerushalayim, maybe we could say the Mediterranean, the Yamagada, sorry, it's not. No, do we know? Was it over here? Was it 10 miles over? 10 miles this way? We don't know. What's right. So how are we going to be able to identify? Really, we're going to be very, very limited to what we could pick out of what places are, because without the names, the descriptions of places. It looks like this, it looks like this, but it's near a mountain. But we're very limited to what we could do. Okay, came along. Okay, this is what the Chazon Ish. Okay, and most people take the Chazon Ish at face value. Okay, now, come along, say for someone called Mishnah Yosef. Okay, his name is Rabbi Yosef Fliegman. I believe he's still alive. And he wrote many Svarim about Shemitah. Okay, Rabbi Maskowitz has been helping me get copies of it. And quite a number of Svarim. Rabbi Friedman gave me one of them also. But he's been very helpful. I mean, he has many Svarim on Shemitah. And he says like this. He says, I think that what the Chazon Ish said is being taken out of context. He says, because he says, first of all, in Svara, he said a name is a name. He says, and also look at these Rishonim, look at the people before us, and look at the Kafta Ferach, and all these other songs that we mentioned, who are all full of these kind of names, who are always taking information from the name, more or less based on Arabic name. He says like this. He says, Chazon Ish, you're misreading the Chazon Ish because he says like this. He says, Chazon Ish is talking about the din of Beishan. That's what the Chazon Ish is on. And the Chazon Ish says like this. He says, when we have Beishan, that Beishan has no mitzvahs of Shemitah in that city of Beishan. So first the Chazon Ish says you should know, when the Gemara says Rebbe was hit to Beishan, it only means the exact city of Beishan, not the surrounding area, which is its own shaila. Did it surround the surrounding area? So he says, no, it's only the area itself. So that means if we want to say which is the spot in Eretz Yisroel that has no Shemitah, let's pretend Beishan is a mile by a mile big, 5 miles by 5 miles, however big the city is. We have to get it exactly on the nose. We've got to get the spot exactly where it is. He says, no. So if we want to do that, then we have to know that Beishan is exactly, what the Arabs call Beishan is exactly where Beishan was originally. He says, so, therefore, we can't be for sure. But if we know that the Arabs said that this place, they call it Beishan, which is, these earliest form bring it as a place, what the Arabs called it, then we know roughly that Beishan was that area. It wasn't exactly that spot. You're right. Maybe it got moved and it got destroyed and it moved over and there's a new neighborhood of Chahena. He says, but But you don't think that Beishan moved from one part of town to the other. He says, Beersheba, we all know Beersheba is in the southern part of Eretz Yisrael. They wouldn't have all of a sudden gone to the north and picked a city in the Golan and called it, okay, let's call it Beersheba. It's silly, you know what I mean? So the Chazon Ish, he's saying, if you look at the Chazon Ish, all the Chazon Ish is talking about is in Beishan. To say that this spot has no Shemitah, you can't say that this spot has no Shemitah because it's Beishan, because, come on, you can't be so specific. But if you don't want to make a specific spot, you want to say, I want to make borders of Eretz Yisrael, and I'm not going to make a border to the nickel. I'm not going to say that here's Eretz Yisrael, and over this line is not Eretz Yisrael. I want to roughly make the border of what Eretz Yisrael is. I have a fair idea of where the land goes to or doesn't, so then I could use these names as helpful in figuring things out. Yes?
You say that when the settlers came from America, so they could have been naming cities, New Amsterdam, New York, wherever it is, but if they dropped the new, then you would...
Right, so they came in and made a city called Bethlehem. They made a city called Bethlehem. So it's Bethlehem's all over the country.
Right, so it's possible.
But nobody thinks that Bethlehem in Pennsylvania is really based on that.
No, I'm saying that it could be that they did move the name from, maybe the original settler people who lived in Bethlehem moved up north, and they said, okay, we'll call them from the name of the original city, and we'll call it Bethlehem.
Right, it's a different country.
Right, it's like a whole...
See, you see that, no, but I'm saying you see that there's a concept of calling a new city, as a reference to your old city. So I'm saying that it could be that,
okay.
You're right, it's not, there is a, you see that it has happened that even from a different country, people call
It's the opposite. Oh, we're from a different country. Like, we remember the old place, you know what I mean? We call ourselves Skver, you know what I mean? Because we remember the old country. This is what, we used to live in Skver, now we call it Skver also. We didn't...
Different country or moving to a different location.
Some say we're saying we moved to Wisconsin.
There we go. Okay. So he gives another example. He says, there's another thing, is that sometimes the name or Chazal gives something that's descriptive. Okay? There's a place, one of the places is called Malei Akrabim. We're going to talk about it in a second. Malei Akrabim. Okay? And the Malei Akrabim, the Malei, it is understood to be adjective. Okay? It's the place that rises up. Okay? There's all kinds of theories as to what the Akrabim part of it is. Okay, the Malei means that it rises up. He says, so when you go to the right part of Eretz Yisrael, which we have enough direction because how weird the Erech is in Eretz Yisrael, you go to the right place in Eretz Yisrael and you see these huge mountains that go rising up into this up whatever. So you get the feeling. So we have something descriptive that tells us that it's going to be in that. It's going to be in that spot. It has a name, Malei Akrabim, and we see what awfully looks like Malei Akrabim. It gives us more confidence.
So
and
geographic markers.
Those are also yes. So
General.
okay. So the Chazon Ish said. The Chazon Ish, if you read it just straight, if you just saw the quote that I brought to you before, and just the quote by itself, he says the Chazon Ish said you shouldn't use anything from Arabic names. And the Mishnah Sheitzah is saying he questioned that based on earlier people who were all using Arabic, and the whole Svarma full of that. And he says, really, he's not convinced the Chazon Ish even said that in the first place. The Chazon Ish is, in context, is correct, but to expand that to mean everything else, I just put you 10 words on the board, but if you take it really what he said, he says he's not so convinced that's really what he means.
By the way, he was a Talmud Muvak of the Chazon Ish.
That's what they say. Okay, so
if
other people,
with nothing else to lean on, so then the Chazonish's cloud was probably the principle.
Because?
So I think it's his brother.
There's nothing else to lean on except for what the Arabs are calling it. Nothing else. You don't have any markers or any geographic reference.
Okay. So again, I have to just say something. Everybody who says don't use the names is up against lots of greater people than us who are very comfortable doing it. Okay. Now, I have to say, this that I told you, that this is like, now we have these like two approaches to how to look at this. Should we be more conservative or more, open to figuring these things out, came even not just I saying to you now as far as using Arabic names and things like that, but came even from things that came from Chazal. And that is like this. In Hilchos Trumas, Chaim Kanievsky has a map of where he thinks the borders of Eretz Yisrael are. Okay? Now, the map that he has is not based on archaeological evidence or Arab names and all these kind of things that people question. Okay? But rather, it's based on Gemara Baba Basra. Okay? The Gemara Baba Basra says there are 7 rivers and 4 lakes. Did I get that backwards? 7 lakes and 4 rivers that surround Eretz Yisrael. And Chaim Kanievsky finds you from all over in different places in Chazal to help you figure out what those 7 lakes and 4 rivers are, each one of them he figures out, he says to you, oh, and this is a medrash over here, and this is a gemara over here. Each one he's going to figure out from which one it is. And based on those cheshbonos, completely, you don't think of a Chaim Kanievsky as sitting there and reading the newspaper. You know what I'm saying? It's totally not archaeological, all based on Chazal. He says, I'm going to tell you, these are what are the borders, okay? If you see the dotted lines on the bottom, a lot of what he has to do with the southern border, which we'll talk about in a second. And he really thinks the border is the higher of those dotted lines. The bottom ones are ones that he explains, and when he speaks about why he thinks those are not right. Okay, but Be'erach, he thinks that those are what the borders are. Okay, that's what he said. So came along. So he has. If you read this, it sounds. I'm not to say, but awfully convincing. Okay? It's not based on anything that's not from Chazal. Came along. If you look on the bottom, the little words that you couldn't read there, Rabbi Yashiv, he showed us his father-in-law, Rabbi Yashiv. And Rabbi Yashiv says, you're right. What you said is mamish based on Bavel, Yishamli, Tesefta, Rishayim, Achronim, which is exact. I mean, it's very accurate. That's exactly what it is. He says, no, not convinced. It's still a suffix. You can never be sure about these kind of things. And therefore, that's why I left the little words on the bottom in faded that you could barely see under the picture. But so Rabbi Yashiv said to him, so it's printed right under the map there in Hilchos Trumas. He says, even so, I'm not convinced, and get to halacha l'maisa. It's a suffix. Who knows? You never know these kind of things. Okay. So even more so here, it's not even a matter of are we using. I'm telling you, there's people who based on archaeological evidence, on Arab names. This is even mamish based on Chazal. I mean, like he said, Bavel, Yishamli, Tesefta, Rishayim, Achronim. I'm bringing it all based on really serious riots. He said, no, I'm not convinced. If you prove it to me, fine. Otherwise, when Mashiach comes, he'll draw the line for us. Okay. So really, we have these two different ways of looking at this. This huge amount of effort people have put in to trying to figure out all these places. Okay, I don't know if he spent all 7 years, but the Kafta Ferach spent 7 years figuring these out, and other people since. I mean, the Mishnah Yosef's got pages on these things. There's lots of Sfarim that have been written about these things. And then there's this very, if I could use a conservative approach that says, listen, only things that we know, like every Yarden we know was not in early Bavel. Or certain places, that's all we're going to do, and nothing more than that. Okay, so now, I'm going to go through 2 more specific examples. So this is a more general question. How should we approach Bechlal making up these borders? And the 2 specific examples to understand it better. Okay, like this. Terry says that there are the southern border of Eretz Yisroel. The Torah gives us the 2 endpoints of that border. Okay, one is the southeast corner of the Yam Melech, Tzei Yam HaMelech Kedma. Okay, the southeast border of the Yam Melech, and on the other end, that's on the eastern side, southeast part of Eretz Yisroel, and the southwest part of Eretz Yisroel, it tells us that it goes to Nachal Mitzrayim and then to the Yam. Okay, so those 2 spots, the 2 ends are pretty well accepted of what they are. Let us say on the right side, where the yellow dots are. The right side, which is the bottom of the Yam HaMelech, roughly, it's sort of pretty easy to pick out because the Yam HaMelech is there. There are people who question it. They say, no, the Yam HaMelech used to be bigger, and this and that, but roughly, we know roughly where it is because the Yam HaMelech is still there. So we could roughly pick out where the bottom southeast corner is, okay? Okay. No, 2 different maps. These are 2 different maps.
Isn't that true south really there?
Say it again?
Isn't that where the dot, is the dot just the generalization?
Yes, a general. No, it's not supposed to be specific.
It should be a little bit more to the
okay, so now,
left.
what we're looking at, the maps that you're looking at, on the left side is of Chaim Kanievsky's map, that you probably remember. The other one is flashed by too quickly. This is the map that the Mishnah Yosef brings, showing not his borders, but the borders of the Adamas Kodesh and the Tzvus Aretz. Okay, in the different ones he shows it. But what we're focusing now on is just the yellow dots. On the right side is the Tzei Yam HaMelech Kedma, okay, and on the left side is the Nachal Mitzrayim. What's Nachal Mitzrayim? The Arishonim would say Nachal Mitzrayim means the Nile River. Okay, but everybody follows what Rashad Yegoin says. Rashad Yegoin says that Nachal Mitzrayim means what's called Wadi El Arish. Okay, and a Wadi and a Nachal means the same thing. A Wadi and a Nachal means a river that only exists during the rainy season. Only when there's rain around there's a river there. But when there's no rain, there's no river. Okay, it dries out. And it's not based on a spring. It's coming from rainfall. So that's a wadi. That's what a nachal is. So Nachal Mitzrayim is understood to be the nachal that comes out from the city called El Arish. Okay, which still exists. You can see it in the bigger map on the right side. It's El Arish, and there's a river that comes out, a wadi that goes east to west and then a little north to south also. Okay, and that's assumed to be, that Wadi al-Rish is assumed to be Nachal Mitzrayim. Okay, again, there are those who argue, but everyone pretty much goes along with the side you're going, who says that Wadi al-Rish is that's Nachal Mitzrayim. So those are the two ends. Okay, we have right and left of what the ends are. Now, but what about the middle? The Torah gives us 5 cities in between, or 5 locations in between, which are, I don't remember, they are Ma'ale Akrabim, I mentioned before, Tzin and Midbar Tzin, those are near each other, or the same. Kadesh Barnea, Chatzar Adar, and Atzmoina. Is it in this week's parsha? No, this week's parsha. Okay, so it has 5. It gives us these 5 places of that in between. Now, those 5 places, it's not a straight line. And there's not a straight line from the east to the west. It dips down to the south, and the Torah, by giving us these 5 names, these 5 places, is helping us to teach us how to make the lines, because it's not a straight line. It's not a straight line across these 2 ends. It dips down to the south a certain amount. Okay, so now, come on, everybody thinks that the borders are roughly the same. I mean, if Chaim Kanievsky has his line, you see how his line goes. You look at these line on the right side is the Tfus Aretz and Admas Kaz. It's roughly the same. I don't mean exactly. Excuse me, there are places that they disagree about, but they have a rough agreement as to what the border should be is. Okay. However, that's the more the approach of the let's see if we can figure out what Eretz Yisroel is. Okay. The more conservative approach says no. The southern border of Eretz Yisroel is the 30th line, 30 degrees longitude line. Okay, what on earth is a 30-degree longitude line? Where does that come from? It comes from 2 places. One is that the Chazon Ish is reported to have said, they say, I don't know enough, they say it's not in the Svarim, but that he told many people that Eilat is not part of Eretz Yisroel. Okay, he says Eilat and the areas around it are not Eretz Yisroel. Okay, Eilat happens to be just under the 30th longitudinal line. Longitude is like the line that, the imaginary line going around the earth. It's around, Eilat is just below the 30th line, and there's another reason. Okay, and that is, they lie on the map. It'll be on the map soon. Okay, the Rambam says in Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh, the Rambam says like this. He's talking about how to know, to figure out the moon being in certain spots. So the Rambam says, you can only use what I'm telling you if you're in places to the east or west of Eretz Yisroel that are roughly approximate to where Eretz Yisroel is. Okay, so if it's places from 30 degrees to 35 degrees, and it's assumed that longitude in those days and our days is the same. Latitude, they say, is not the same, but longitude is the same. And so 30 degrees to 35 degrees are, if you do that, then you're going to see, those people will see the moon at the same time roughly as Eretz Yisroel. But if you're going to go too much north, I mean north of 35 or south of 30, then you're not going to see that, because those places are Einam Mechuvanos Keneged Eretz Yisroel. So they say, you see, the Rambam says that the southern border of Eretz Yisroel is at the 30 degree longitude. So therefore, we should only make the southern border of Eretz Yisroel is at 30 degrees. So we don't have to do anything fancy and figure out where cities are. The Rambam says is at 30 degrees. 30 degrees.
It's over the north.
Well, no, there's 2. There's 30 Mishloshim Milas, Av Shlam Hein Milas. So
that's the north.
So 35 is the north and 30 is the south. Kagoin shall you notice the tzafin oil mishloshim miles avlam heimas. I've noticed the tzafin yosim mizeh. Pachas means below 30. The tzafin yosim means 35, and pachas means below 30. He's giving you 2 lines. Yeah, no, look at the second line.
North is between 30 and 35.
No. There are 2 lines. 30 and 35. 30 is the south. 35 is the north.
That's how it works. Right.
Oh, in the northern hemisphere. In the northern hemisphere, it's 30 north. 30 north to 35 north. Yes. But if it goes more north than 35, or more south, what do you say? Right, between 30 and 35. We'll get that in a second. So between 30 and 35, then they see the same. Otherwise, they don't see the same. But it's Ein Mechuvanos Keneged Eretz Yisroel. So they say, you see, the Rambam says that the southern border of Eretz Yisroel is 30. Okay, now, there's a whole pile of questions on this. Okay, this is not in Hilchos Shmita, this is in Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh. Okay, the question like this, first of all, is, it's hard to justify in any stretch that the border really goes down to 30. Okay, the 30 degree longitude is be'erich 40 miles south. You're going to have maps soon. Just give me a second. It's about 40 miles south of any place that anyone thinks is the end of Eretz Yisrael. So I'm not to say, we're not trying to put the border by to the inch, but there's no way no reason to believe that Atzmoina is all the way down there. Right, so, but it has, the Torah gave you the 5 spots for which to draw the line, but we can't, there's no explanation that could put one of those down at the bottom. Now we might be missing something, but to think that they're so off, there isn't any simple way to say it like that.
Well, the Lana is the same.
And the Pashas is that the Rambam here is not talking about borders of Eretz Yisrael. The Rambam is saying the Rambam is telling you an approximation of where Eretz Yisrael is, and it has to do with, really, because these didn't have to do with Yerushalayim. Okay, they didn't have to do with Yerushalayim, where they see Eretz Yisrael. So he says, if you see roughly the same as Yerushalayim, and for example, you're like from this year to this, you see that he's not giving you an exact. The Torah didn't say the border was a straight line. 30 and 35 are straight lines. He's just giving you a rough idea of how far you could be, that you see approximately the same. You're close enough that things are the same. In Brist, they have a clock that tells you exactly what time Nates is in Brist. Okay, But chances are that at Das Yeshurun, Nates is approximately the same time. Not a quarter of a second off, but it's approximately the same. So he's telling you roughly from 30 to 35, it's approximately the times where it's up. We're not being so exact. We have an atomic clock there. Okay, now, furthermore is Reb Chaim Kanievsky, not in the Shemittah, in Shekel HaKodesh, on this sefer, Kiddush HaKodesh, says, when the Rambam says, where do you get this number from 30 to 35? He says, you know where you got this number from? He says, because you look a few prakim back, the Rambam talks about people coming to report about the Kiddush HaKodesh, about the new moons or whatever it is, and the Rambam says, so people come from approximately this many days walk from Yerushalayim, and they come, therefore, from 29 degrees longitude to 35 degrees, because he says Yerushalayim is at 32. So you go 3 longitude north and 3 south, and that's where people come from. Okay, people walk from this far. So his border is, in other words, you try and make it equidistant from Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is with the center. That's really what counts. So he says, go 3 degrees north and 3 degrees south. And he says, and when the Rambam says here 30, he doesn't mean 30, he really means 29. Okay, because 30 to 35 is not even, because if you're at 30, Yerushalayim's at 32, so 3 up is 35. And so when he says 30, he really means it's the beginning of the 30th degree, which is at the end of the 29th degree. Now, if you go with the 29th degree, you're way past the lot. Okay, so I'm saying when Reb Chaim Kanievsky not writing about Shemittah, writing about Kiddush HaKodesh, the Rambam over here is talking about what he said a few prakim beforehand. That really it's 3 degrees. Again, like we're saying, just like a rough estimate, a certain amount from Yerushalayim. It's rough. It's 3 degrees. I don't know why he calls 130 and 35, but whatever. He really means 29 and 35, which each 3, which comes from a few prakim before. Okay, so. Elamai, this is not meant to be drawing borders of Eretz Yisrael. He's giving you just a rough idea. In Mechuvan, it means roughly to what Eretz Yisrael is, not to be something so exact. We have, this is a sefer from one of Rabbi Fati, of what Eretz Yisrael, the border of Eretz Yisrael. Not meant to be exact either. What is like this? The green part, on the top of the middle portion, is the part that sort of everyone agrees is Eretz Yisrael. And the orange that's in the bottom is the space in between where most people would draw the south border and the 30-degree line. Okay, you see the 30-degree line is way down on the bottom near Eilat. Okay, and only the purple on the very bottom of the map is the part that everyone agrees is not considered Eretz Yisrael.
Where's Eilat?
Okay, Eilat is the very bottom. Okay, the very bottom of the purple, near the water. Okay, so the 30-degree line is but there's like 40 miles between the 30-degree line and the top of the orange over there, okay? So this is a big area of disagreement, okay? That there's 2 very, very different ways of looking at this. And one is to say we're going to try to figure out the error where the border of Eretz Yisrael is and make the line that looks like where the line goes between the orange and the green. And the other one that says you know what? The only thing we know is the Chazon said Eilat is not, okay, so Eilat is safe. And he said 30 degrees north, and they based on this Rambam 30 degree north. Okay, 30 degree north, and which is roughly near Eilat, and therefore that's the only part. And what they call this is called the Arava Droimus. Okay, the southern Arava. Okay, depending how you pronounce it. The southern Arava. The Arava is the name of the desert. In that
Arava is a desert.
Yeah, Negev? What? Underneath the Negev, and then under the Negev, if you some Torah, according to this,
Arava. No, I got it.
No.
So what's the
Arava?
You're getting into this. Okay. Anyway, okay. What?
What is the yellow?
The yellow, something we're not talking about. Okay, just leave it here. Okay. No, it's Azar. Okay, so now, So this is the southern border, and the southern border is the border of Eretz Yisrael that has the most shilas to it as to what you should or shouldn't include. It has the most practical because there's loads of Yidden living. There's loads of Yidden living in that purple and orange area. Okay, and there's farming going on over there. So there's lots of shilas about produce from all those areas. Are they or not Eretz Yisrael? There's just two very different ways of looking at it. I'm not talking about the fine details, the broader picture, how we should look at the southern border. Should we say we have a rough idea of where it is and take the line between the orange and the green, or should we say nothing doing, just take 30 degrees and between orange and purple? Okay? See now, one last question we talk about. The other specific question is about the northern border of Eretz Yisrael. Okay, now not to talk about the whole northern border, but the Torah tells us that in the northern border, the northwest corner of Eretz Yisrael is called Hor Hahor. Okay, in Mishnah and Gemara it's called Amona or Turi Amona. Okay, but it's the same. Almost everybody assumes that means Hor Hahor. So Hor Hahor is someplace in the north. It's the northwest of Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara describes it as pointing out over into the water. Okay, it's a mountain that's along the shore, or seemingly, that points out, and that somehow it sticks out into the water. And there's lots and lots of shittas about what that is. I'm going to show you 4 of the better known shittas.
Syria, what is that?
Syria is in the country. What?
America.
Thank you. Okay, they must have named it that. Okay, so the first is we're going to go from north to south. Okay, the first is way up in north, something called, I'm not going to pronounce it, Jebel Al-Akra. Okay, and that's what the Captain Pharaoh says. It's in Turkey. Okay, in modern day Turkey. Okay, it's all the way up north. Okay,
That's Hor Hahor.
that's what the Captain Pharaoh says. It's Hor Hahor. There are some, I didn't mean to say it, but there are some who say that even more north of that, there are mountains. I don't know if you can see this, like a piece that sticks out like a point over there, which says Kirid Khan and this. Those mountains are called the Amnion Mountains. Okay, so there's people who say that's Turi Ammonin. Okay, it's those mountains over there. So there's even more there into Turkey. Okay, but this is north enough for most people. This is the capital of France, so that's where it is.
It's like Wayne Lebanon.
No, this is Turkey. This is past Lebanon, past Syria. This is in Turkey. Okay, it's in Turkey. Okay, the capital of France. Okay, it's at the very southern part of. There's an arrow on the board. I have an arrow. There's a big green arrow. Okay, no negative on here. Okay, the next is the Shuvas Rambam says that the Hor Hahor is called Banias. Okay, and which is in Syria, in what we call Syria today. That shita is consistent, if it meant anything to you, with the Rambam we saw before, because that Banias is right at the 35-degree northern longitude. So it's like really convenient if you want to see the Rambam over there meant 35. That was really the borders of Eretz Yisrael. His Banias and his Chuvas is Berach right at that spot. So that would be very convenient. Okay, the third is something called Raz Shaka, whatever it is. I can't pronounce this stuff. This is Tfus Aretz. It's next to a city which is called Amion, okay, which may be Amana, okay, anything could be for that matter. Okay, and the last is the Marit. The Marit says that it's mukubal by everybody that the northern border of Eretz Yisrael is at Wadi al-Qasimiyah, which is also called the Litani River. It's like an extension of the Litani River. That's what people call it. And he says it's Murgo B'fi Ha'olam, that's the northern border of Eretz Yisrael. Okay, now the difference between these spots is Be'erach 175 miles. Okay, all of modern day Israel is only 275 miles tall. So 175 miles is not a small thing over here. I mean, it's really a lot of space over here. Okay, and according
It's not enough
it's not such enough communal mice. It's not.
It's kilo.
No, it's not.
You got groceries from
It's nice.
Okay, we're not going to talk about whether getting stuff from Grime makes a difference. We'll get there.
You get tahini from Lebanon.
Right, so it has to do with these kind of questions and whether whether it belongs to God. We're not up to that yet. We have many times before we get to that. It's in one of those pictures down there. But anyhow, eventually we're going to get to whether it's owned by God. But it's not so lemaisa. There's not much trade going on. In the answer, yes, a little bit. Okay, but anyhow, so this is not so lemaisa to us. These borders are not so lemaisa to us. The southern borders are very, very lemaisa. Okay, but I just put this out just to show you, again, the southern border is a Lamaisa Shaila of 2 different approaches, and the northern border, these are 4 main sheets, there's plenty of other ones also, of what the borders could be for Israel.